Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Logos Project. This is your host, Dom. And in today's video, I'm going to be going through the books that I've read throughout the months of December 2024 and January 2025. So the last 2 months, I was going to do a video. I'm trying to do a video a month on the books I've read that month, but I was traveling because it was the holidays. So wasn't able to do that. So welcome to my book reading video of the month, although I've missed a month. So I'm going to go through the books I've read. One of them I'm in the middle of, but I'm going to finish it soon because it's so good. And I'm so excited to share what book it is, but we'll get to that at the end. So, in no particular order, I actually read this one. I finished this one towards the end of January, even though January is not technically over yet. But this is Father Henry de Lubac's book, The Splendor of the Church. Of course, anything by de Lubac, I'm starting to realize, is just absolutely fantastic. Like, I'm starting to get a glimpse, just a glimpse, of the way this man's mind works, and it's breathtaking. It's refreshing and it's expansive, and it's just a pure delight to read anything written by him. I mean, this man, this is a great theologian. This is a giant. Like, you don't have to agree with him on everything, but there's no question that this is an absolute giant of a man who has left a mark on the church that will be remembered for centuries. I mean, I don't even know how to praise him enough, right? That being said, this book, The Splendor of the Church, it's not one of his more academic books. It's again, the French title is Méditation sur l'Église, a meditation on the church. So it's given for young priests. It's a compilation of talks that he gave to young priests. It was published towards the end of his, you might say, confinement, although it wasn't necessarily a physical confinement, but it was more like he wasn't allowed to teach or publish. And so this came out after that time period. Again, Henry de Lubac, The Splendor of the Church. Sorry for the glare. So of course, I mean, there's so many chapters that are absolutely fantastic. The chapter on sacrifice and the priesthood was, of course, great. But when I was reading it, I realized that I've been spoiled by Joseph Ratzinger on topics that are related to priesthood and sacrifice and liturgy, because Father de Lubac, at the time Cardinal de Lubac, died in 91. Was it 91? Or was it 96? I think it was 91. Yeah, he died in 91. He was born in um, 1896 or 1886. Oh, I can't remember. Dang. Anyway, the point being though is that he didn't really write any kind of, work on the theology of the liturgy, but Ratzinger spent a lot of time thinking about that. And so Ratzinger again kind of is very profound in that area and very systematic and very thorough. So I that chapter was good, but I was like, oh man, Ratzinger's a lot better here, and that's because de Lubac isn't trying to give a treatise on this topic. Anyway, that was just a caveat for one chapter if you're a Ratzinger enthusiast like I am. However, again, there's chapters here on Ecclesia Mater, right, the Mother Church. That's just an absolutely beautiful chapter. The Sacrament of Christ, the Church in the world, um, the heart of the church, right? Which he kind of references his book Corpus Mysticum here and there, which is a much more technical book. Anyway, but the most beautiful and poetic and profound and fascinating chapter of this entire book is the last one, titled "The Church and Our Lady," right, where he kind of gathers together in one meditation all of the new avenues that have returned to the church's consciousness by a retrieval of this relationship that was lost in emphasis, you might say, between Mary and the church, like the nature of that relationship. Um, Anyway, much to say there. I mean, there's the French uh, theologian René Laurentin, right? René Laurentin. I don't know how you would say it in English, right? Who's very important here. Ratzinger cites him several times as well. Of course, there's Hugo Rahner. He actually doesn't mention Hugo Rahner in here. I think that maybe Rahner's book was written after de Lubac on this topic. Again, not Karl Rahner, Hugo Rahner. He mentions Matthias Schieben, of course. And anyway, he just kind of gathers all this stuff together in this one beautiful chapter, and it's just fantastic. So yeah, so I would say obviously huge thumbs up for Henry de Lubac's The Splendor of the Church. In fact, if you want to read Henry de Lubac and you don't know where to start, this would be a great place. It's not meant to be an academic book, although it'll make you reflect, right? So it's a great place to start. It's just one prolonged meditation on the church. So as usual, anything by de Lubac is a 2 thumbs up. That was great. I just finished Joseph Ratzinger's book Signs of New Life, which in fact is not really a book that he sat down to write. It's rather a compilation of 14 sermons on the 7 sacraments, 2 per sacrament. And these sermons were compiled by, if I'm not mistaken, by Bishop Stephen Oster. At least he wrote the foreword. Again, just some fantastic sermons. I mean, there's one in particular that really stuck out to me on the Eucharist, where he describes the meaning of the signs of bread and wine, and the liturgical implications of those signs. And this scandal of particularity, right? That the sacraments are instituted by Christ with particular signs that have a particular history and context, that in fact say something to us about the universal God, right? Who is so grand that he can make himself particular. But he kind of unpacks like the meaning of the Eucharist, why bread kind of brings heaven and earth together. He talks about the process of bread, and then the way you make wine and how it points to the passion, and just a beautiful sermon, really great. So yeah, this is a nice little booklet to have, right? Sermons on the sacraments. If you want to spend some time reflecting on one of the sacraments, or if you want to prepare some kind of paper or presentation on one of the sacraments, get a copy of this and read the sermon that's associated with that sacrament, or the 2 sermons associated with that sacrament. So yeah, so a great book by Ratzinger. This book right here is by Henry de Lubac, and it was absolutely fantastic. In fact, it surprised me because it's the sequel to Augustinianism and Modern Theology. It's the second one of what de Lubac called his twins. This one's called The Mystery of the Supernatural. The reason why I say I was surprised is because in Augustinianism and Modern Theology, it's basically a very academic history of doctrine, right? Starting with St. Augustine, and then, but through the eyes of those who misinterpret St. Augustine, such as Baius and Jansen and things like that. Then going into the modern scholastics, and modern here doesn't mean contemporary. It means like 16th, 17th century scholastics, such as Cajetan, John of St. Thomas. He brings up this guy, Fenelon. I don't know how you would say his name in English, but he pops up a lot. De Lubac seems to really like Fenelon, and because he brings him up in other works as well. Anyway, there's all these different scholastics that he engages with. Dominic de Soto. Anyway, there's just too many to list, and it's my favorite part was the beginning, because he makes possible this profound understanding of Augustine, who's sometimes often well, not sometimes, right? He's often misunderstood, especially towards the later end of his life, where his writings get much more polemical, and so part of the blame falls on Augustine in a certain sense, because he's writing in a much more heated way and tends to exaggerate. That being said, it's not really that the blame falls on him, because the heretics that he was fighting against were needed to be refuted. So it's just a more of a situation thing. But later Augustine gets rather polemical, but he shows the unity of Augustine's thought nonetheless, and shows the misinterpretations of Augustine by Baius and Jansen. and so it's absolutely fantastic. Hey, new Gluff, how you doing? Um, so yeah, so anyway, oh, what was I saying? That was the first one, right? Augustinianism and modern theology. This is the sequel, The Mystery of the Supernatural. And I was surprised because, in the first one, he's historically accounting for what he sees as a novelty, right? In this idea of a separate natural world with a separate natural transcendent end, right? Of course, we could talk for hours about that. But in this one, it's a more positive case of what he sees to be um, the actual teaching of the great tradition on man's end, on man's natural desire to see God, right, for the supernatural. Um, but what surprised me so much about the book was several chapters where, uh, by commenting on this particular theological topic, he brings up all of these principles of theology that apply to everything else, right? Not just to this topic in particular, but that apply to how you do theology, what a mystery is, and how you understand mystery but don't comprehend it. And there's a whole epistemology in here, and it's so poetic and yet very precise. Like it's not like the caricature that sometimes is made, and sometimes fairly, but not for the grades, I would argue, towards the resourceful people, which is that they're imprecise. Well, there's been some criticism of de Lubac being imprecise in some of his citations, right? But that's in places where he actually admits that. And in the citation says, although this applies to something else, it still works in principle for what I'm trying to say here. And so the essence of what he's saying is not changed. But my point, though, is that the book goes into this beautiful, like epistemology, like theological epistemology. It's very precise. It's very scientific, you might say, but it's absolutely mesmerizing and gives you a sense of wonder and a genuine flavor of de Lubac's spirituality. So anyway, it was absolutely fantastic. This was the best book I read in the last 2 months. No question, best book I've read in the last 2 months. Um, he just, every time I pick a book up by him, he keeps raising the bar. I just really, really appreciate his writings. So in um, in November, I told you guys that I had read this book, Red Rising, right, which is a fun kind of sci-fi modern book that came out, I think, in 2014 or something. It's not Shakespeare, it's not Moliere, or it's not Dante or Dostoevsky or anything like that, right? But it was just pure fun. It was really, really fun. It was like this kind of dystopian sci-fi with like Roman, kind of cultural world building, right? And kind of like Gladiator or Braveheart meets, I don't know, Star Wars or something. It was just a lot of fun. So I read the other two. I read these pretty fast because it was so much fun. Golden Sons, the second one, and Morning Stars, the third one. And my favorite of the three was the second one, which is not usual, right? Usually a sequel is not as good as the first book, but to me, Golden Sun was the best of the three. It was absolutely fantastic. It became this like space opera. It was really great. And then Morning Star was also really great. And the best part of Morning Star was the ending. He found a way to wrap up the story in a way that was absolutely satisfying. Like there's no regrets. Like very satisfied and happy with the ending. Now the problem is he went on to write three more, and he's coming out with a fourth one also. And so I started the fourth one, and I'm still at, as you can tell, at the beginning because I've gotten kind of bored. So I'm gonna push through and keep going, but I heard that the fifth one is really good, so it's worth it according to others to read the fourth one, but it's less engaging. But I just really loved the first three. I thought they were fantastic uh, in terms of just pure fun, pure reading good stories, Um, and so the last book that I'm almost done with, I'll probably be done in the next few days, is another book by Father de Lubac. I've kind of, as you can tell, I've set myself a goal to read all of de Lubac's writings, um, because I just feel like it's healthy for me. It's like good for me. Like it expands my mind, um, and it's just it really makes me appreciate the beauty of the faith. But it also um, really challenges the suffocating straitjacket of secularism that's present in all of our lives, right? Especially in my life. And so this book, it's absolutely fantastic. He described it as, because he wrote it, I think it's the second published book. He described it as naive, right? Because he was overly enthusiastic and anyway, but I don't know what he's talking about. Like I am absolutely loving it. It is hard to describe how much of a page turner it is. Now, if anyone else knows what I'm talking about, they're going to think I'm a complete crazy nerd because it's one of the most academic and nerdy books out there. I'm talking about Corpus Mysticum. It's just, I mean, there's a whole passage where he describes the history of the word mystical, of the word mystery, and of the word sacrament. And there's this incredibly rich layers, dimensions of the word that especially today in our straitjacket secular world, that just we've completely lost. And so it's almost like he's just expanding my categories in a way that are deeply biblical, deeply patristic, and he shows also kind of somewhat of the constriction in some areas, but also the fidelity in other areas. And it's a very long and complicated history, right? Ultimately, he shows how um, the argument of the book is the term mystical body and true body have been flipped. Mystical body used to refer to the Eucharist, and true body to the church. Now we refer to the church as the mystical body, and we often say that the Eucharist is the true body of Christ. But these words were flipped. Now, obviously, the church can be said to be the mystical body of Christ, and the Eucharist is the true body of Christ. And he shows precisely how the tradition is 100% faithful to that. But he also shows kind of, how controversy led to this flip, especially with Berengarius and other people. I mean, there's so many people he cites. But it's just fantastic. I just love this kind of historical theology, right? I've always been drawn to that. And that's why I love the Resource Monk guys so much, because it really deepens, broadens, and gives a freshness to the faith that I already know in terms of being a believing Christian, right? Believing Catholic, right? I already know that Jesus Christ is truly, really, and substantially present. I know that the church is the body of Christ. Mary's immaculately conceived. I know all these things and I believe them, with all my heart. But through this historical theology, it's almost like I discover them anew, right? And in their originality. And there's like a new life that's poured into them from the wellspring of the fathers, right? And then the great scholastics come alive in a way that's just incredible when the soul of the patristic era animates the text in a way that I can now like see, right? Which is funny because reading a lot of Ratzinger has made me um has made my reading of St. Thomas Aquinas like immensely more fruitful. Like it's hard to explain, but because Ratzinger is in the business of showing you the kind of harmony and the whole, of all the different aspects of the faith, the analogy of the faith, how it all fits together. When I go to read St. Thomas, it's like he says something and I'm like, oh wow, St. Thomas, is implicitly referring to this other mystery, but he's not really saying it, but it's there in the back of his mind. I can tell through my exposure to the kind of synthetic way of doing theology of Ratzinger, because Thomas is a master of synthesis. But it's hard to see that because he's written so much and you're just reading part of him or what have you. Anyway, so yeah, this book is absolutely fantastic. I'm not done with it, but I will be in a few days because I can't put it down. And it's just it's so spiritual. Like it's not just theology that these guys are doing. It's it's mystical, right? It's a prayer. So that's the books I've read in December and January. And yep, that's it. And then starting with February, I'm going to be reading a lot more books, a lot of de Lubac. I'm on a de Lubac kick before I move on to, I think I'm going to go on a Joseph Pieper bender. This is so nerdy. I'm going to go on a Pieper bender. Anyway, let's see what we got in the chat. Let's see. Um, cool. Yeah, I'll have to check that out. French, Russian. Oh yeah, Soloviev, Florovsky, and Bulgakov. Yeah, so I haven't read any of them. Ratzinger quotes Soloviev quite a bit. Well, not quite a bit. I mean, here and there, it's not uncommon that he quotes him. But I don't know about Florovsky. However, Bulgakov, I have one of his books, the something like The Mystery of the Lamb. I can't remember what it's called, but I have it on my shelf somewhere up there. And I've heard many very good things about Bulgakov. I've heard that he's basically a genius. Uh, you know, uh, Someone once said to me that Louis Bouillet kind of basically does in the West what Bulgakov does in the East. He's kind of like the Western sociologist, Louis Bouillet. But I heard that Bulgakov's sociology is incredible, but I don't know anything about him than things I've heard. Um, so, what else is there? Um, the Lubach's drama of atheistic humanism seems like a solid start. I don't know about a start. Uh, I mean, I'm sure you're commenting that, so for you it'd probably be a good start, but I wouldn't recommend it to most people out there as a start. But it is one of my favorite theology books out there. Like, I read that one. Was it November? I can't remember. It's in one of my book videos. But the drama of atheistic humanism. Oh, I can't praise it enough. Like it just like turned my world upside down. I mean, so many. I'm still like thinking about it, and it's been like 2 months and a half since I've read it, and I still pick it back up and look at parts of it, and I'm gonna have to reread it because there's just passages that are just incredible. Um, what's up, Drew? I don't know if you're still here. Yeah, that's a great point. Not to be too polemical, right? Angelic Doctor must be read through the tradition, not as it. Yeah, and precisely when you do that, do you see how important he is? Because he really is Homo ecclesiasticus, a lot like the Lubach, right? Which is he gathers within him the whole of tradition and shows its synthetic nature, and then offers it to people, in his time, um, always synthesizing and gathering. There's a humility, right? He's not creating a novel system that is like the product of his own genius, but it's really a reception of something not thought up by him and then synthesized by him and given. And so it's very much, St. Thomas, of course, reading him apart from the patristic era is to really miss what animates the thought of St. Thomas, really. Um, that's awesome. Yeah, I need to read Bulgakov. I really do. Sophiology is interesting in that it seems like such an easy thing to get heretical. Well, I don't know. So actually, this is a topic for another video, but Sophiology, right, and its connection to Mariology, paradoxically, the figure of Mary is precisely what um, is needed to prevent us from falling into a kind of monism, a kind of pantheism, which ends up seeing creation in a kind of divinized state. Right. I mean, the whole idea, right, of the Garden of Eden, of Eve being given to Adam as a helper, right? The word helper is really interesting. Like, help her with what? Like, what is Eve going to help Adam with? Is this like a sexist joke about making him dinner? Like, right? No, it's a lot deeper than that, right? The helper part refers to a help against idolatry, precisely because in the fact that he is male and that she is female, they realize that they're creaturely, that they're not sufficient. They're not, Adam is not androgynous and self-sufficient, but rather um, is a human being insofar as he depends upon others, right? And so children, male and female, spouses, all of that, the social nature of man shows that in fact he depends upon others and that he's not self-sufficient. So what that means is that the woman here is a reminder to the man that he's not God, right? Which is why the story of Eve falling prey to the serpent and then tempting Adam, who then falls prey to Eve, is an inversion of the order, right? Because God um, wants basically sets up the animal realm as you know under the dominion of mankind, and then within mankind you have Eve, which prevents Adam from basically being idolatrous and worshiping himself, right? And then Adam obeys God, who is his ruler. But in the fall, it's the whole thing is inverted, where the serpent convinces the woman to convince the man to disobey God, right? Um, which I mean, there's so much to be said there, because in the pagan myths, it's and not all of them, but in a lot of the pagan myths, it's man that sins first, and then woman becomes the curse, the consequence, because man was aboriginally self-sufficient and divine, androgynous, and then he's split into two as a curse because of his sin, which is fascinating. Uh, I mean, inbuilt in that is an entire history of sexism, and the whole reason for the fertility cults and the kind of pantheistic view of God as a mother, right? Which is, anyway, there's all that's connected, right? And so what I'm trying to say is that Mary, in fact, and I would argue sophiology actually guarantees the kind of ontological independence of creation, so that it is not absorbed into God in the process of salvation. So the figure of the woman in the Old Testament and brought to a pitch in the New Testament, and then developed in the tradition, is precisely what uh, actually secures us from a form of self idolatry. Interestingly enough, sorry, that was a rant and it was kind of discombobulated. No, you're good. I know you weren't being polemical. In my view, Mary makes the incarnation a historical event, uh, giving history a meaning and direction. Yeah, no, absolutely. Oh man, but yeah, yeah, The Mystery of the Supernatural by de Lubac was definitely my highlight this time around. Um, and then in November, The Drama of Atheist Humanism. I mean, this is why I'm trying to read everything he's written, because it's so affected me, especially the drama of atheistic humanism, that I want to read everything he's ever written, so I can kind of see what he sees, if that makes sense. I like to think of theologians as, this is going to sound awful, but I like to think of theologians as trampolines, right? Like, I read them almost like I jump on a trampoline, so I can kind of, you know, go beyond the trampoline and try to see the mystery that they're looking at. Sometimes, and I think a lot of people can fall prey to this, is you revel in the theology of a particular theologian, and that's kind of where it stops. And the problem with that is that you're not really doing theology, you're kind of doing theologianology, right? And so that's why it's important to have several voices in your journey. So I started with Ratzinger, at least on the channel, right? And now I'm moving on to de Lubac. And eventually I want to do all of Pieper, and Pieper has written a lot less, so it'll be easy to go through Pieper. And I'm kind of reserving things for Balthazar. I want to be ready for Balthazar, although I should probably get with the times and read him. Are you familiar with Giambattista Vico's Nuova Scienza? No. Bit more of Renaissance flavor, but that's where my history comment came from. Gotcha. Yeah, I don't know who that is. Sorry. Justin. What's up, Dom? Never read any de Lubac. Can you speak to some of his controversy in light of Thomism, grace, perhaps critique of Gaudium et Spes from the likes of Ratzinger and Rahner? Yeah, I mean, it's a big topic. I don't see um, how Gaudium et Spes would be connected to a critique of de Lubac. Um, de Lubac and Ratzinger would definitely be on the same page. Whoa, my camera just went out. Can you guys hear me? That was weird. I'm gonna have to fix that. My camera went out. You guys still with me? Give me a thumbs up if you can see me. That was weird. Anyway, the controversy between de Lubac and the Neo-Thomists, not all Thomists, but the Neo-Thomists in particular, has to do with whether there is a natural desire in human nature for man's supernatural end. Okay, we're here. Okay, good. For some reason, uh, my camera just turned off. Anyway, so that's the controversy there. Um, I'm going through all of the literature because I want to do that before I make any videos on it, because a lot of people are making videos on it that do not know what they're talking about. And it's quite frustrating because, it's an important topic actually, and we'll talk about that. But yeah, so, the Lubach said that St. Thomas teaches, and he quotes him, right, that man has a natural desire for the beatific vision, right, for his supernatural end. Um, but this, of course, this end is an end that is gratuitous. It's not owed to human nature. And the Neo-Thomists will say, well, this kind of takes away from the gratuity of grace, because the end of a nature corresponds to the needed powers in that nature to attain that end. Because when God creates a particular thing, right, and gives it a particular end, he also gives it the powers to attain that end. And so to say that the desire for the supernatural end is engraved in nature is to do violence to the gratuity of that end, because God would owe it to man, right? And de Lubac says that he has a whole slew of arguments why that's not the case, and why St. Thomas was well aware of this and yet held to this paradoxical understanding that man was not just a nature in terms of other animals, but a created spirit, right? He was both spirit and something. Sorry, he was both nature and within himself something that transcends nature. Man was a paradoxical being because he was not just animal, but spirit as well. And so then it has to do with, how is the end of man gratuitous if um, if it is the end of irrational nature, and that's the whole argument of the mystery of the supernatural in de Lubac's book. But I can't rehash that here. As for Gaudium et Spes, de Lubac doesn't say much about the second half of the document, as far as I can tell so far. But elsewhere, he criticizes a lot of the kind of progressive, optimistic naivete that blows up after the council. And you see this especially in his writings on Joachim of Fiore, or of Flore, as some say. Um, and he writes against this medieval author who talked about an age of the Father, which is the Old Testament, an age of the Son, which is the New Testament, and an age of the Spirit, which will come after both the ages of the Father and the Son. And this age of the Spirit is a kind of like a third moment that discards the previous two and goes beyond them, right? And it goes beyond the institution and it becomes purely spiritual, right? And so it kind of de Lubac criticizes Joachim here, and shows how Joachim's thought actually influences a lot of German idealism, and a lot of the chaos after the council is theologians thinking in terms of this rupture, and of a new church that is goes beyond, right, the tradition, the past. So a kind of hermeneutic of rupture, as people call it, right? And so he's thoroughly critical and of all of that, right? And so yeah, and so he would be right there in line with Ratzinger, and yeah, people like that, right? Ronner's more complicated. I haven't read a lot of Ronner. I wouldn't be the one to ask about that. I do plan on eventually reading him, but as you can tell, I got to have my Peeper Bender first, so I haven't done that yet. Um, well, I'm glad it helps, Justin. It's hard, yeah, it's hard to kind of condense everything into one. But yeah, de Lubac is definitely very critical of this kind of Joachimite progressivism after the council. In fact, he was labeled a reactionary and kind of ignored by everyone after the council. He was kind of described as like a papal court theologian, like you know, what's it called? Like one of the lieutenants of the Pope that no one cared about. Kind of like what Ratzinger became, although people were much more hostile towards Ratzinger when he was head of the CDF. So yeah. Yeah, but yeah, de Lubac's fantastic. Yeah, when it comes to the nature grace debate, I'll tell you what, right? If he's wrong, That's one thing, right? People don't have to agree with him. But what I find unproductive is a lot of times when people disagree with him, they misrepresent him, right? Um, there's Stephen Long, Lawrence Feingold. There's two names that come up. Stephen Long's book Natura Pura and Feingold's book on the natural desire to see God. Um, there's some passages in it that show that they either didn't read parts of the Lubak, which I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying either they didn't read it or they misunderstood what they read. For example, with the whole obediential potency thing. Um, oh man, this is too big of a conversation. There's a passage where Dulubak speaks of obediential potency as having to do with um, basically, miracles and things like that. But that the natural desire, so sorry, obediential potency is tied to um, what was it? Sister Mary of the Assumption talks about this, and I can't remember how she describes it. It's like the act of existence in the essence of the creature is actually given like a different form. I can't remember. You know what? I'm not going to talk about it because I'm going to make a mistake while I'm criticizing others. So anyway, it's okay. One thing I'll tell you is this. People have criticized the Lubaka saying that man has, and this is not the authors I mentioned, man has only one end and it's the vision of God, and therefore he does away with the consistency of nature. He does away with the natural end of man. But Delubak doesn't do that at all. Delubak affirms that man has a natural end. He absolutely does, right? And so that's one example where I've seen people say stuff like that, where it's like, I mean, he has like a whole chapter on this, right? Where he absolutely affirms the fact that man has a natural end. It's just that this end is not a transcendent final end, right? It's a political end. It's an end of his nature as a political creature, right? Anyway, all right, I'm just rambling. Read Delubak. He's great. He's fantastic. And without further ado, give me money. Wait, where's my banners? Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. And if you want to help out with my studies, I'm starting to run thin on money. Help me out at patreon.com/logosproject. And you can sign up to my Mariology course, which I'm giving. I have 3 students this time around this is my first time giving my Mariology course. If you want to sign up for that, I'm pretty happy with the outline I created for it. I also gave twice a course on the church, ecclesiology course. I'm also pretty happy with that. So if you want to sign up to that, that would be a great one to take. You can do them back to back, ecclesiology and then Mariology, which fit well together. So yeah. So thanks for tuning in, guys. And we will see you all next time if I can find the out button. Here we go. Peace.